So good evening, everyone. My name is Vikas Agarwal. I'm the founder of AIF and PMS Experts India. So firstly, I would like to thank all the participants for coming in and joining this call. So it's again a special day because I have with me Mr. Viraj Mehta. Mr. Viraj Mehta is the portfolio manager at Aquarius. So we thought of inviting him and just wanted to understand more from him in terms of how is he looking at markets. Before that, just to give you perspective, so at AIF and PMS Experts, it is our endeavor to organize this knowledge based session so that we can share and impart more knowledge with our investors. And at the same time, the whole idea is of organizing this session is to also give you perspective on what these industry and domain experts thinks about markets, where the markets are headed. So today we'll have a detailed discussion with Viraj and we'll try and understand more from him in terms of what is his approach towards investments, how does he take care of his portfolio, how does he construct the portfolio. So two or three things that essentially we do at AIF and PMS is we have developed our internal framework called 3I framework. So 3I's framework is basically talks about what we look at is we first try and understand the style of the portfolio manager. So that's very, very important. We try and understand whether the portfolio manager is a growth investor, or he follows value investing, or he looks at GARP as an investment model. So what is it that the portfolio managers looks at? Because it's very, very important to position the manager accordingly in the portfolio of the client. So first thing that we examine in the investment framework is the style of the portfolio manager. The second thing that we look at is the quality of the portfolio. So we examine that very, very carefully in terms of, for example, how many calls have gone wrong, how many calls have gone right since inception of the fund. So we try and understand what kind of quality is being maintained, especially during the difficult times of the market. So that is second thing that we look at. And third and last, basically we look at the performance. So within performance, we look at how consistent the performance is, how risk adjusted returns have delivered by portfolio managers. So we spend about 70% of our time to look out for high quality portfolio managers. And I'm glad to share that one of the high quality portfolio manager that I have ever come across is Viraj Mehta. Whenever I interact with him, he's very down to earth, very humble, shares his views very openly, and at the same time he's one of the best portfolio managers in terms of performance in last 3 years. If you look at, although performance is something which keeps changing, so one should really can I mean one would not talk about that, but at the same time one portfolio manager that I have come across who is very, very humble is Viraj. So let me formally welcome Viraj on the show of Ask the Expert. Welcome on the show, Viraj.
Thanks a lot, Vikas, and thanks a lot for very kind words here.
Yeah. So just to give you introduction about Aquarius. So Aquarius Group was started in 2007. So when they started up, they had this clear idea in their mind that they wanted to focus more on merger and acquisition as one of their verticals of businesses, and the other was basically into private equity. As the company started growing, 2016 was the time when Viraj and his team started their asset management business within the group, and they have completed about 4 years. So ever since Viraj started the portfolio is up and running. I think the size of the portfolio is about 250 odd crores. If you look at particularly, I mean the team, so team is well experienced. Viraj heads the portfolio management business at Aquarius. So Viraj has over 11 years of experience as we speak today, and out of 11 years he spent good amount of time with Franklin Templeton, which is also one of the most respected fund house in India in terms of managing equity, one of the oldest multinational asset management business in India, where he was initially involved in analyzing the company as analyst, and then later took over as fund manager for smaller companies, where he was managing sizable amount of portfolio and was completely accountable to generate alpha in the portfolio. And then he also had worked with Mr. Sanjay Bakshi. I think everybody knows him because of faculty management studies, and he also has runs his own company called Quest Value Quest, if I'm not wrong.
Yes,
Where
Value Quest Capital.
yeah, so where Viraj has worked with him, and I would say that imbibed. culture of investing, and probably we'll understand more from him today that how has been his learning. So that's pretty much about Viraj. So the fund basically focuses more on mid and small cap, and Viraj is known for picking up companies at an early stage of their growth curve, and looks at taking the calls on those companies. So Viraj, over to you. If you could just give us some bit of introduction, if you feel that anything to be
Sure,
added, and
sure,
also share your investment experience so far.
sure. So thanks a lot for Vikas for an extremely generous introduction, and thanks a lot for everybody who's sparing time on a Friday evening to listen to us. I'll just give a brief background about. You already know about Equirus, but about my background. I come from an extremely humble middle class family, born and brought up in Gujarat. Did my engineering here. Graduated out of MDI. Incidentally, joined Equirus as a sell side analyst right up first up. Um, and um, if I look at my early years, I was kind of only a numbers investor. So essentially, the first one or two stocks I bought were companies which were dud businesses, but basically which had more cash on books than the market cap itself. So typical Graham kind of investing I used to follow in probably first 2 or 3 years. It also worked probably because 2009 was a time when everything was cheap. But what I did not understand was that these companies you can only make 50, 100% return and nothing after that. But if you actually buy good businesses, it compounds over a period of time, which is a great lesson I kind of learned at Franklin Templeton, which is a place I was where probably 10, 12 sharpest investors in the country were there in equities, really risk averse investors with high pedigree of business understanding and the kind of acumen I gathered there. So just from being a numbers investor, you followed it up with more business understanding and business research, which is which was which really helped to think slightly more longer term rather than just a pop of 50, 100%. And the last and the most important thing was management, which I learned from Sanjay when I worked with him at ValueQuest Capital. Sanjay always emphasized on managements that you could marry your daughter into. That kind of has stuck with me. That I'll not partner with somebody that I'm not comfortable marrying my daughter. And incidentally, I just had a daughter some 11, 12 months back, 13 months now. So I mean, the philosophy is to merge all of this. See, you will in our market you will never have the perfect investment. That is, you will never have an Asian Paints at 10p. But if you think about all of these three parameters, our idea is to have a mix of all of these three parameters: business, management, and valuation, and essentially merge it at a broader level to think about how do we make sustainable growth and capital appreciation over 3 4 years. We do not really think that you can let go of any one parameter, that you can buy a bad business and make good money, or you can partner with a bad management. And the last but the most important thing is you can pay 100 p and p doesn't matter. So we do not believe either of these three things should be compromised with, and then try and look for investments. So that's the kind of core philosophy. What tends to happen is that across time frame, in all time frames, you will have businesses which are going or which are doing very well but are underappreciated by the markets, which might be going through temporary 1 or 2 quarter blip, and market just underprices them ridiculously. So these are the kind of opportunities that we look at. We are a pretty concentrated portfolio, so we have some 14 15 stocks in our portfolio. For a small cap, that's pretty concentrated in my view. but which also makes us believe that we have to be really in depth with our understanding of the businesses and our understanding of the companies. Which is what we try and do. So even if you look at our churn over last 4.5 years, our churn is less than 20%. We have not even churned our whole portfolio even once as of today. So, that's the kind of quality of work that we put in. We buy probably one new stock in like 2 or 3 months, but that is the kind of work we'll put in before we buy a new company or a new business in our portfolio. So that's more or less about our philosophy. And happy to answer
Yeah, so
more
before I
questions.
come to the fund more in detail, going back to your career, so we are all keen to know what made you to start this fund in 2016, and you based out of Delhi, or you when you were with Sanjay, you where were you, like what was your location?
So I was actually based out of Delhi with Sanjay. The entire team of ValueQuest was based out of Delhi. But to be honest, I've worked as uh, as learning and as an apprenticeship, I would say. Not basically managing money, but helping other people manage money at Franklin, or at as an analyst, uh, to put it in a slightly sophisticated word, uh, at other places and other people's fund. But I'm a good Jew. I'm an entrepreneur at heart, right? I would always like to believe that after certain years of learnings, I can essentially run a fund on my own. So when Ajay wanted to start, and I and Ajay were talking, it just made a lot of sense. I said, we'll give it a go. We were bootstrapping. We were not going to have fancy offices, or we were not going to have fancy systems. But what I do know and what I do understand is investing. So essentially, we started with 2 clients and 4 crore rupees. My entire net worth and a crore from Ajay. We started with essentially 4 crores and 2 clients. Um, and that's the idea of doing good but not satisfied and improving your skill set is what drove the burning desire to do something on your own. And there was also another slight thing that my family and my wife's family, everybody were based out of Ahmedabad. So Equirus was anyways based out of Ahmedabad. So there was this added incentive that if you make it work, you can essentially work out of Ahmedabad for the rest of your life, and you don't have to worry about changing places ever in your life.
No, so that brings me to another question. If you look at most of the portfolio managers, they are based in Bombay. So what made you to stay away from Bombay and operate from Ahmedabad?
So in my life, there are only 2 months that I essentially stayed in Bombay. That was May and June 2008. I stayed there as in my MBA days. There is a summer internship between first and second year. My summer internship, believe you me, was in a company known as L'Oreal. And I, I was lost. Like, I couldn't understand what was happening, and I stayed in Bombay, and I hated it. Like, with 20,000 stipend that I used to get, I could only afford a place which was like really far. Like, L'Oreal's office was in Lower Parel, and I used to stay like 30 kilometers away. And I used to travel by train some of the days, and I and I realized this is not for me. I can't stay in Bombay. So that day I said to myself, I will never shift to Bombay, like never ever. So then I joined Equirus as a sell side analyst in Ahmedabad, worked in Chennai with Templeton, worked in Delhi with Sanjay, but never went to Bombay. I don't think I'm cut out for Bombay. I like slightly slower pace of life.
So coming back to now topic, and before that, Viraj, I was looking at the performance, and we have our internal framework, as I said, of examining the performance, the consistency.
Right, right,
And you said that you run the concentrated portfolio. Now, whatever little understanding that I carry is that if you look at the concentrated portfolio, they have their own share of underperformance also, because you're not buying the markets basically.
right,
But in your case, I looked at you have been continuously outperforming the benchmark.
right.
Uh, I mean, across the time frame, except for a quarter or so. This was 2000 and I think 18. uh, uh, you have been outperforming the benchmark and the peer group both. And you run a strategy. You started your small cap strategy when small caps were kind of beaten down by the street because of many regulations and many things. Post 2007 I'm talking about.
Right.
So what is the mantra behind it? How could you manage to do this?
Yeah, I think result is just an outcome of the process that you follow, right? So we have an extremely rigorous process of screening companies. You look at 2016. We started in 2016, 2017. Obviously, we did not know, but in hindsight, it just catapulted the entire small cap. Even the crap stocks just went up a lot. But what happened is, it very early in the game, it made us believe, and we had to keep our guards very high, right? Because if you actually bought a bad business somewhere in that time frame, you kind of paid the price of it over next 2 to 3 years. So we had an extraordinary we had an extraordinary uh, you know uh, framework under which we kind of did not want to take businesses which were subpar. So um, I think we believe that if you essentially buy right businesses, uh, there can always be an underperformance for a year or so here and there. But if you in India, if you end up buying earnings growth of a good company at reasonable valuation, in one line, that is the secret of success, in my view. Like, don't overpay, buy decent companies, let earnings growth come. I think that is it. You don't need anything else. And when you do that over 12, 13 companies, some of it will not work out. In our case, only 30% of it has not worked out, right? We have not made money on almost 27, 28% of our portfolio. But where we have made money, we have made big money. We have made 7, 8, 9 times that's 7, 8, 9 times our money. So whenever we do make money, we hope, and our endeavor is always that if we win, we want to win big. We don't want to invest money for 10 and 12 and 15% CAGR companies. We will endeavor in all our companies to make 35, 40% CAGR, and some will not go right, but the portfolio return should still do decently if we get at least 60, 65% hit rate right in our companies. Also, I think one more thing I wanted to talk about was pyramiding. Pyramiding is actually a very good concept where you essentially start small, 2, 3, 4%, and when the company starts doing well, you kind of keep adding onto your positions. You keep buying your winners, and don't average down your losers. That has worked out beautifully for us because, like with everyone, we also had our set of losers, but we did not average down. We had a TCPL packaging. We did not have, we lost 40% on that, but we did not average down. It was 7, 8% of our portfolio. We ended up losing 40%, but we did what the mistake we did not do, apart from actually buying it, which was a mistake. But when that 8% became 4%, we did not become greedy and said we'll buy more and average down. That's kind of something we really avoid doing.
Yeah, the other question is again, going back to your portfolio. 2018-19 was the time when everybody wanted to be away from pharma,
Right.
and I don't blame them, because the reason is pharma was underperforming big time. Look at Sun Pharma, look at any stock that you pick up. And I saw that in your portfolio before COVID, you were ahead of the curve in terms of picking up some of the pharma stocks.
Right.
Is
Right.
it by design, yeah, or intentionally you wanted to do so, or it was mainly because of your framework thrown the data numbers that the earning growth is good?
I would have, I'd be lying if I tell you that I actually knew that pharma would do well post COVID anything. I had no clue, right? And we had pharma and pharma related company Alkyl Amine, which supplies 75% to pharma. Those were just like we had Suven Pharma and this. Those were two basically fantastic companies, and we had owned them for like 1.5 years before even this rally started. So if intrinsically there is a lot of value in something, it just represents itself, and we buy that. By the same analogy, what happened was they became reasonably expensive by probably August September last year. But you could still see a lot of financials, especially secured financials, having a lot of value. So we generally like to be before the market in things which we think today or are underperforming or may underperform for a year or so, or 1.5 years. But if we get it right, we get very outsized returns in those companies, which is what we did. We sold uh, chemicals to essentially buy uh, 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 this financials, which have actually gone up like another 200% for us. And now we think there is a lot of value in capital goods. So it basically has to do with value. You can never time when value will be realized, because we bought alkyl amine and it did not go anywhere for a year. Like we could buy between 450 and 550, 600 for literally a year and a, I think year and few months though. So I think intrinsically, if business has value, sooner or later market will catch up. There is this a saying in Gujarati that basically, if you're, I mean, the literal translation of that is uh, there is, if your daughter is beautiful, there is no need to go and look out for a groom. So if your company is good and it intrinsically has earnings and value, you don't really have to care where the investor will come from.
Okay, okay, understood. So, Viraj, at Aquarius, you follow this investment philosophy called Banyan Tree.
Right.
So, can you throw some more lights for our audience and investors to know what is this concept, and if you could elaborate your investment philosophy?
So Banyan Tree is actually Equirus's
Need to
own.
be a little louder, please. Sorry.
Yes, Banyan Tree is Equirus's own philosophy about its own business. So essentially, just like Banyan Tree, our one business started, made its root very strong, and then it started supporting other businesses. As you know, Banyan Tree has multiple trunks and multiple roots. Uh, Even though you start with one main, I would say, main trunk. So investment banking is where we started, but as and when we became bigger and bigger, each business started supporting other business, and that business kept on becoming bigger and bigger. So today, our securities, as in our institutional broking business, will be the biggest in our company. I wouldn't be surprised if PMS is the largest business of our company 2 or 3 years out. So we we try and be large part of our business, and then that business supports to bring other businesses to scale.
Okay, okay, great. Uh, so Viraj, so most of the investors have joined, and all of them are witnessing the levels of the market. So markets are at all time high, and
Right.
most of the investors, when I talk to them, all of them, and they've logged in today also, they want to know your views that is this the good time to enter into mid and small caps? A, and B is, where do you see more value going forward?
So mid and small cap, to generalize as a category, is slightly tough, because unlike a Nifty or a Sensex, it's not a pool of 30 or 50 companies or even 100 companies in case of top 100. Mid and small cap is a very large basket of anywhere between 250 to 500 crores, give and take, right? Um, Within that, if you will uh, just look at pure data, this is the largest amount of deleveraging companies below top 100 companies have seen in last decade. Interesting bit is everybody's interest cost has gone down anywhere from 15% to as high as 80% in terms of interest rates. So there is a technical deleveraging which is happening. There is growth which is happening for these organized players, because see, you might think these are smaller companies, but they're small companies in when you will compare them to Reliance or Bajaj Finance. But a company which is doing 1,000 crore top line in India or 2,000 crore top line in India with 200 crore of profit, they are not typically your small companies. Like they still employ 5, 7, 10,000 people in their market. They're still market leaders and they're gaining market share from everybody. I think if we believe, and I certainly do believe that this is the start of a good growth cycle for us as a country, then the largest beneficiaries of those will be mid and small cap companies. See, what happens is when your growth truncates to 4% or 3% or 4.5%, the larger company still grows at a similar pace that they were growing in the past. The sufferers are the unorganized sectors, the MSMEs, and the smaller companies. But the larger the growth pie becomes, the larger benefit happens to somebody who's slightly lower rung down the order, and who has to fight slightly less for the business.
But the other worry investors have at this point of time is that what if market corrects tomorrow, and then when the market corrects, mid and small cap corrects more than the market. So
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
for your
So there are two, three ways you can think about this, right? One, there is a market where things are priced to perfection. Things are priced to absolute earnings perfection, be it some of the chemical companies, some of the pharmaceutical companies. Uh, uh, those are tough things to make money out of. But then there are other companies, let's say, I mean, for example's sake, um, SBI today is at the same price it was 12 years back, and it has made money over these 12 years, which has accrued to its book value. So it is still very, very cheap. Now, I may not buy it because I don't really buy such large companies. But to say that just because Nifty is at 15,000 or 14,500, ICICI Bank or SBI may not make money, I think is slightly unfair. Probably, things which are expensive today, be it your consumers, your staples, your some of retail, large retailers, some of these might not make money. But that doesn't mean that um, everybody will not make money. So let's say even at an index level, small cap even today, in dollar terms, is below its 2008 peak. 12 years have gone by and we are still below our dollar 2008 peak. What does it tell you about the sheer undervaluation that exists in these sectors? You look at 25-year history, right? You look at every year the number of companies which have doubled. Every year minimum 50 to 100 companies double. Even in 2009, for 24 companies doubled. So there are always pockets of companies which are in their bull markets of their own in terms of businesses and stock prices. If as an investor we are able to identify even one or two of those, that does the work for the entire portfolio.
But Viras, there are two school of thoughts. So one says that big becomes bigger, and the other one is India is a country where you get a lot of businesses like company like Relaxo, which is one of the largest food mega, this company, leader company, and they are today even small cap. Look at Garwal Technicals, for example. They are
Yeah, we own.
yeah, you own them. So
So again, big does become bigger. It has inherent advantages, but these are not small companies. Garware Technical is the largest manufacturer, has 50% market share in shipping ropes in this country. If you look at globally, it has globally 8 to 10% market share in a lot of its products. Let's look at other examples we own. APL Apollo Tubes is the largest producer of steel pipes in the country. We own a company known as Nosil Limited. It is the largest rubber chemical player in the country, and it has 5% global market share. When people talk about rubber chemicals, they talk about China plus Nosil. Those are the pedigree of companies. So, yeah, big does become bigger, but the boys we are owning are big in their category. So they are going to become bigger.
Sure. Sorry, I'm putting a lot of questions to you, and
No,
these
no,
are
please,
questions which I
please.
keep getting from our investors. So it's my moral duty to ensure that all their
No, no,
questions.
100%. Yeah. The idea is to keep it a free wheel chat. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah. So in the recent development from Government of India, where they cut the tax rate for the corporates,
right.
there is this perception amongst investors that only big guys are getting the maximum benefits. So is that to an extent true, or what is your sense?
See, I mean, tax rate is a competitive advantage country has vis-a-vis other countries. Same players in the same country only has advantage against the people who don't pay tax, which is the unorganized. None of the stock market players are essentially in unorganized segment. They are killing or unorganized segments are essentially losing market share in some of the segments. But there are a lot of segments where actually unorganized is gaining market share. You have plastic furniture, unorganized is gaining market share. So there are this this is true for some of the very large capital expenditure companies, be it telecom, oil and gas, to a certain extent banking. It holds true for some of these segments, which are very broad brush and larger segments. But there is always an under layer to these companies, whereas you have companies like Relaxo, which became a 100 bagger, Avanti, which became a 100 bagger, which was in our portfolio, which became 6 bagger for us, Alkyl, which became an 8 bagger. So there will always be undertone market leaders, which are today slightly low on market cap, but are still doing a phenomenal job of market share and profitability. Those are, in our view, going to be the next winners over next 3-4 years.
Well said, I think. Well explained, Viraj. So I would say that I would urge all our investors also not to go by these so-called common generalized statement that big becomes bigger, and they are the biggest beneficiary, etc. I think it is very important that as an investor you have to be very very specific in terms of understanding that what we are trying to understand. And therefore, at AIF and PMS experts we keep organizing these knowledge-based sessions so that we can share more and more knowledge. So I think all right, the Q&A part has begun now. I'm glad to see that there are a lot of questions, and I would urge other people to also type in their questions in Q&A box so that I can shoot these questions on your behalf to Viraj directly. So the first question comes is when do you take the cash calls in your portfolio?
When you don't know what to buy, and I've never come across such a situation in last 12 years. So I have never taken a, believe you me, I've never taken a cash call in my life. Um, the inherent belief and the optimist in me tells me that India is going to keep growing, and at least my companies are surely going to keep growing. So if that's the case, uh, do I really want to sell something to buy the same thing 10 or 20% cheaper? And what if it doesn't fall 20% and it goes up 20%? Then you don't buy and look at it 5 years out, it has gone up 10x. That's a mistake I would not like to make. Obviously, I would sell something to buy something better, and which is fine. But as an investor, I will only take a cash call if I think I don't have any lucrative opportunities. It has not happened till now for me. So never ever taken a cash call.
Okay, many questions, so please bear with me, Viraj. The other question is, which sector do you see has more opportunities in terms of surprise in earnings on higher side?
A lot of sectors, yeah. I think banking will surprise tremendously. I think next year's NPAs are going to be record low NPAs of provisioning for last 5-7 years. I think all the banks have over provided. Capital goods is in my view the dark horse for next couple of years. I think cement will surprise people on the upside. I think tourism will surprise people on the upside. One of the tourism company we own, they told me that their Q4 this year is going to be better than Q4 last year. So they told me that November this year was better than, sorry, December this year was better than December last year. So I mean, I think tourism will surprise on the upside. Um, you will have a lot of surprises in some of the discretionary plays. So autos might surprise a little as well. I think mortgage loans will surprise people. Will Real estate will surprise where I think things are
I
not
think
built in. Yes,
sure.
sorry, because you were saying something. Hello.
Yeah, yeah. So I think Viraj, there are more than 200 people who have logged in today, and the number of questions are just increasing. So I would urge all the investors and audience to please type in your question in Q&A box and not in the chat box. Uh, the second question is, how will PLI scheme benefit portfolio companies?
It will not benefit our portfolio companies for sure. None of our companies are in PLI scheme. But see, one of the fact that people tend to misread is that PLI is beneficial to country as a whole, right? Because if you're going to import less mobiles and going to make them here, or less TV screens and going to make them here, it's beneficial to country. But to say that to only one or two companies, it is going to be hugely beneficial, I disagree. What it will do is actually it will increase the competition in the segment, which is great for the consumer, which is great for the country. I'm not too sure the kind of benefits one or two of the listed players are seeing today in terms of working capital and margins are sustainable. And I'm not too gung ho on those listed plays at least. Because hello.
Hello, Vikas.
Yeah,
What if
Vikas, Vikas, can you hear us?
because
can
you're
you
on
hear
mute.
me?
Yeah, now I can
Yeah,
hear
can
you.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I. So other two interesting question. Uh, One is somebody is asking, do is it good to assume that you buy companies without interacting with management of these small companies because they generally don't allow analysts to interact with?
No, no, that's not true at all. Yeah, I mean, we basically go to. If you look at one of our letters, every year in our September letter, we write how many AGMs we went to that year. Except COVID year, we essentially go to at least 90 AGMs a year. We attend multiple calls, conferences. We talk to managements one on one. So, um, except probably one company that does not talk to any investor or analyst. We talk to all our companies. We don't talk to them too often because you don't want to. You don't want to. There is a basic thesis of investment over 3-4 years. So you want to talk to them probably once in 6 months just to get an idea whether you are on the same track. But we do interact with them, whether on mostly on public forum, be it AGMs or analyst meet or conferences.
Yeah. Other question is, how big is your research team, Viraj?
So we're a team of 3 people, including me. But I would think we're 3 really hardworking people.
How do you decide when to sell stocks?
I think that is something I still think I don't have a very right answer to. I've been trying various things over last 12 years to decide what's the what's the perfect way to sell, right? I've come to a conclusion there is no perfect way. Each situation is different, and kind of uh, you sell either when things have become uh, superlatively crazy expensive. They are crazy expensive, and you think a relative return or absolute return from here is less than 10% CAGR for next 3-4 years. The second thing is if the business is far lesser or much worse than what you thought it was. And the third thing is if you incrementally think that you can potentially buy a far superior business and a far better opportunity, is when you sell. As I earlier said, I've essentially never sold to take a cash call. Mostly I've always sold either the initial thesis was wrong, or I know of something which is incrementally far superior or better.
Okay. What are your thoughts on auto sector? I think you've already mentioned that you're bullish on auto sector. But still
autos
somebody is asking, yeah.
autos
Do you
autos
think that CNG would play out better than oil companies? Or what is your sense?
Oh yeah. I mean, there is no doubt that CNG is going to be the the big leg of growth over next 3 to 4 years. Autos should also do reasonably well, but we have to be extremely selective when we think about auto companies and what we want to buy in auto companies. Auto as a basket has some really phenomenal companies, be it OEMs. We have world class OEMs, right, from two or three two wheelers, and
I think your daughter is crying.
no, she wants to come in and join the party, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
So I don't know. So you know s- uh, so we have some really world class two wheelers and four wheeler companies, but we also have some of the most competitive anks. So we have people like Suprajit, we have people like Bosch, we have people like Minda, who are these world class auto ancillary manufacturers. So I think the buffet is pretty widespread in autos. We have to pick and choose what we like, but some of these companies will still make a lot of money from here. Is what I think.
Yeah, next question is somebody wants to know, and this question is something that I keep getting always. How do you calculate your PMS returns? Because the returns declared may not be that of all investors in PMS. So this needs to be explained. Yeah.
No, there will always see. There is now there is earlier there used to be different people would show different returns based on model portfolio, this portfolio, that portfolio. But now there is a standard way that you can calculate returns that SEBI has provided, which is based on NAV. Um, Obviously, all investors may not have same return. Some may have slightly higher return, some may have slightly lower return based on their date of entry in the portfolio. But two investors who would come in my fund on the same day will have the same return.
Any mistake that you would like to highlight that you made in your portfolio?
Multiple mistakes here. I've made mistakes of buying companies which were not good businesses, and I still ended up buying them, and they were not great. So I bought a company known as a paper packaging company where I lost probably 40%. The business looked very good for a very long period of time, but it wasn't a great business. And when demon happened, they kind of lost the volume growth. They kind of lost they kind of lost the margin, and then the raw material prices went up. So that was like a pretty tough time. So yeah, we made mistakes in assuming how good the business is. Essentially, more or less, our mistakes have been around this framework where the businesses were not as good as what I thought they were initially, which is where I ended up losing a lot of money.
So what are your initial step of screening the companies?
So, in most cases, screens start as mathematical screens. So, we do a lot of financial screening based on past numbers, recent quarters, but then it goes to a lot more beyond than just initial screenings of financial numbers. And we look at the company's power in the value chain, how big, how good the moat is, or if the moat is not there, can they charge more, can they charge less, are their employees happy. If everybody in the value chain is not happy and it is not a win-win situation for all of them, it generally doesn't end up being a good situation for company in the long term. If you look at some of the really successful companies, they everybody in the value chain ends up, their distributors ends up being happy. So I think that's a we have ended up realizing that the companies which satisfy the aspirations of everybody in the value chain, those probably end up being the most successful companies in the country.
Yeah, so there is one question from Mr. Sudhanshu Saxena with regards to mutual fund portfolio. So, Mr. Saxena, this is something Viraj may not be following. So, probably I will connect with you on one-on-one, and I will try and give you those answers. So, post this call, I will call you. Yeah, so Viraj, are you there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Couple of questions very quickly. How would you see capital goods sector today? Companies which have survived last 10 years of no capex cycle at all.
Oh, I think some of these companies are poised to at a very good place. Like they have got their P&L very lean. The costs are extremely lean. They have basically survived and managed their balance sheets for a pretty long time. And in spite of really tough time, and uh, I think the capex cycle is just about to do well. So I wouldn't be surprised if some of these companies do really well over next 3-4 years. I think the survivors of last decade uh, will be reasonably compensated over next 3 to 4 years. We've actually written about one such company in our recent letter as well, in our January letter.
Yeah, so what would you call yourself? Value, growth, contrarian, guard, investor?
An intelligent investor.
Who is your role model in investments?
2 3 people, yeah. In India, I really look up to Anup Maheshwari, Pulak Prasad of ex Warburg, now runs Nalanda, and Baburaj Pillai.
Other interesting question is, so what have you learned from them?
So Pulak, what I learned is how to scale a business, right? So Pulak essentially scaled his business from zero to close to 30,000 crore AUM over 10 years. It's I think it's outstanding how he has managed his team. Nobody from his team has left him. Anoop, how do you essentially find those small nugget companies, meet them and buy 5 7 10% in those companies and stay invested for 10 years? And Baburaj Pillai is, you always keep learning. So I used to talk to sir about uh, how I wasn't able to invest in some of the new age businesses. He said I didn't either till 3 years back. I went to every conference that was there about tech, went there, understood those businesses, and then made investment. So, relentless, I would say, pursuit of perfection is what I learned from him.
Yeah, I think more or less we've answered most of the questions. So some people want to know your views on. So how much concentration do you have in particular sector in your portfolio?
I think except financials, which now is around 25% of our portfolio, or 22, 23%, we don't really have too much concentration for a sector as such.
Yeah, one client is more keen to know again how is the returns calculated in your PMS, like so how do you report these numbers to SEBI, etc.
There is a standard SEBI NAV based reporting that all PMSs, including us, have to do. So there is no model portfolio, nothing. There is pool accounting of the entire fund, and NAV is calculated based on that.
One interesting question is, suppose you have another 100 rupees incremental, how would you allocate now?
No, so I'll buy roughly 60 rupees of the existing stocks that I have, because I think there is value in 60% of the stocks that I have today, and I'll look for opportunities for another 40%, and that I think I'll take 3, 4, 5 months to deploy that.
Okay. I think we are done with the question and answer. So before we conclude the call, Viraj, so how would you now look at markets, of your broad views on the markets?
See, I think after having made so much money over last 1 year, I wouldn't be surprised if we do not really get too much return over next 3, 6 months. I do not see a broad-based correction at all. I think the earnings is going to surprise a lot of people, including the corporates themselves. The demand is going to surprise also, um, which is why I think there are a lot of opportunities today where I think at least us we think we can make a lot of money from here.
Yeah. Uh, there are a few questions which have come up and they're requesting me to ask this question to you. So the other question is exponential run in US tech stocks. What is the link implication for India in short term as well as medium term?
I see US is the mother market. Yeah, if US does well, most other markets do well on an average. Uh, I think tech stocks are some of, at least I would say the platform based company in US are seriously overvalued at 200, 150 times revenue. It just makes no sense. Um, if they correct, I think they'll correct, but then there'll be shuffle of that money into slight value stocks. I think that should bode reasonably well for India. It shouldn't really matter.
Because in the recent past, we saw small caps and mid caps going down, beaten down a lot.
Right.
Now, this is my observation is that people are using the same lens while looking at mid caps and small caps going ahead as well. And some of
Right.
them are really scared at this point of time that if the market corrects, then again, their stocks will be done, we will be beaten down like anything. So, do you think that is the time to change the lens, or what is your view?
I think, as I said, we are still below 12 years of dollar returns at an index level, and earnings of some of these companies have just started coming. So, at a broad brush, I don't think we should see a significant correction. At company specific, the opportunities are huge. The opportunities for some of the players is really there. So I don't think we should be worried about 5, 10, 15% correction. If I mean, we have seen, right? I mean, we can lose 5, 10%, but if we want to make 100 or 200%, um, we should be able to brunt that blow and move forward from there.
All right, so we are done with question and answer. So in case you have any further question for Viraj or me, please write to me at vikas@aifpms.com, or you can reach out to me, or you can drop in an email. I'll call you back with your number, and then we can perhaps answer those questions on one on one. So once again, thank you so much, Viraj, for coming on the call, interacting, and answering all the questions so patiently.
Thank you so much, Vikas. The pleasure is all mine. Yeah. I mean,
Thank you. Once again, I take this opportunity to thank all the participants. Today we saw more than 200 people logging in. So once again, thank you so much for joining the call. And we will keep organizing these sessions and we'll keep updating you. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Thank you, Gaurav, for helping us to put up this beautiful show as the expert.
Thank you.
It would have not been possible without your support. So my special mention to you, Gaurav. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Vikas. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.